is now time for our panel discussion. I would also like to introduce our panel moderator, Mr. Jamie Smiler. Mr. Smiler is a lecturer and researcher at Welltech with interests in entrepreneurship and innovation within the tourism sector. His recent research for tourism industry Aotearoa highlighted the growth potential of the Indian market and the extra value it can offer to the New Zealand tourism economy. I would also like to call our panelist, Mr. Kiran Nambiar, to join us. Mr. Nambiar is the Business Development and Convention Bureau Director, Destination Queenstown. He is responsible for the development and implementation of DQ's B2B strategy for trade, bureau, and study. He has also worked with Tourism New Zealand as Country Manager India and Regional Manager India and Southeast Asia for 9 years. Over to you, Jamie.
Thank you. E ngā manahu, e ngā reo, e ngā raurangatira, me ngā manuhiri kua tae mai, ko hoki mai i tēnei ahi ai, ngā mihi nui ki a koutou, ngā mihi nui ki tēnei panel, tihei mauri ora. Thank you for coming back this afternoon and joining us for the panel. Gary has given me permission, and I'm quite thankful for the permission, to allow some of our audience to engage with our panel members in this afternoon's session and to ask some questions. So if you have any questions, there will be some microphones floating around, and just put your hand up and Gary will come and find you. I've just been listening to all the presentations today and found it very interesting, but in this session we're going to focus a bit more on the tourism aspect rather than the aviation side, but we will touch a little bit on some of these issues of aviation that have come up today. So it's been really interesting listening to Chris talking about sustainability in tourism. I got an email this afternoon from Lisa Bond from Whale Watch Kaikoura, and they have been nominated for the world's most sustainable tourism business, which is really great to see. And yesterday I listened to a presentation from one of my students, and they said tourism should be benefit the host community and the tourists, and it should be in that order. So for tourism to develop sustainably in New Zealand, what sort of role do you think the Indian market can help play in that?
I mean, absolutely, we need to demonstrate the benefits to the host community, and that does have to be top of mind. But of course, the tourism business is going to naturally have its own needs to be profitable, to employ people, to provide a means for its owners as well. So the Indian market has got up to the 9th most important for New Zealand, but it's still small in the overall context. So when we're talking 68,000 arrivals, and I think we all believe it can hit 100,000 and keep on growing, compare that to 1.5 million Australians, over 400,000 Chinese visitors, well over 200,000 USA and UK. So its importance right now is reasonably minor, but it's its potential. And as we have talked, it's the nature of the Indian market. It has some natural characteristics that we can build on. The fact that we get so many Indian visitors coming in October, November, and coming in May, we can cater for visitors at those times of year without any problem whatsoever. And they also like to get around the country, do lots of activities. So the natural existing characteristics of that market are, they actually help us with our sustainability challenge.
Kieran, you want to say something?
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. I just want to add a couple of thoughts on the same lines. So we say that a host community, a welcoming host community, is probably the most important aspect a tourism destination need to have. There is no destination in the world that can be seen as a successful destination if the host community is not welcoming. So it is a very big aspect for us as the tourism industry to develop the understanding that the host community has in terms of what tourism does, what value it adds, how it enriches their lives. So that's a big message. And then just talking from the Indian side, in India there is a saying, Atiti Devo Bhava, which means that your guest is a form of God. So you respect your guests like like you would if God came into your house. So what I'm trying to say is that Indian visitors understand the concept of respecting your hosts just because they are brought up in a way that you treat the host the way that you would treat God.
Now I understand why I was treated so well last time I went there. So Kieran, just touch on what you were saying there. From a destination management point of view, where do you see the Indian market helping to add value to Queenstown?
It's exactly what Chris said earlier. The best value that the Indian market adds to New Zealand and to Queenstown is by the peak that we get through our autumn. So in Queenstown, unlike the rest of New Zealand, where summer's very popular and there is a kind of a dip all through the year, in Queenstown we've got two peaks, one over summer and then another peak over winter due to the ski proposition. So things get a bit slow in town around April and May, and then in September, October. So April, May being summer holidays in India is a fantastic time actually to get to experience autumn in Queenstown. So that's a great value proposition. And towards October is where we get Diwali holidays and maybe some of the early wedding season. So with the honeymoon traffic that starts in October is also a great filler for the shoulder period in Queenstown.
And just one more question for you. If for the operators or people who are engaging directly with the visitors, are there some things that you could help them to help support Indian visitors when they come?
Yep. So we like to think that it's very easy to market to the Indian visitors because it's an English-speaking nation. It's estimated that there are about 125 million English speakers in India. So going forward, it's going to be like the largest English-speaking market in the world at some stage. So it's easy to market. And like when you're looking at China, where the tech platforms are different, you can't really use what you use for the rest of the world to market in China. You need to worry about Weibo and WeChat, but we don't have those problems in India. However, there are these nuances that you need to be aware about the Indian visitor, especially when it comes to food habits. So, a lot of Kiwis are now vegetarian, but it's a choice that you make to be vegetarian. But with a lot of Indians that are vegetarian, it's got religion as a base. So they are serious vegetarians. Like as a Kiwi, if you're vegetarian and after 5 days you haven't got vegetarian food, you will sneak in a lamb and you'll be okay. But the Indian visitors won't. They'd rather die than eat something that's not vegetarian. Thus, it gets a bit more complex when you're looking at some of the really wealthy sector of the business, which are Jain visitors. So not only are they vegetarians, they don't eat anything that grows below the soil. So that makes it even more complex. So while it's easy to market to the Indian traffic in general, we have to be aware of these nuances and cater to these specific requests that they have around their diets. So you can't do pumpkin soup every day. You can't have just one vegetarian option in your menu. You need to kind of go deeper and give a better offering. Also, if you're running a hotel, right, and you know that most of your visitors from India come in through April and May, it's actually pretty simple. You have to stock up your minibar with stuff that caters to the Indian palate. So, put masala tea there, just pretty simple. And all like other snacks and savories, which will make sure that your minibar sales boom as well.
Not much effort for a lot of reward, I suppose. This one is for Greg. Greg, how do organisations like Qualmark continue to add value to businesses when so much of the consumer trust has moved towards peer-to-peer platforms and away from institutional platforms?
It's a commonly asked question that where is Qualmark? And when it was relaunched in 2016 as a sustainable business evaluation, it was a recognition that to remain solely around an audit and star gradings, we weren't winning. And in those days, it very much was an audit. You either passed, you failed, you got a cross, you were told, look, you needed to change your sheets twice a day. Whereas now the focus is on working with individual licence holders around business improvement. It is around recognising the different aspects of your business that are important, and everything from the types of things that Kiran has spoken about. So the value proposition is quite different, and I did mention also there's a lot of criteria that help access to international markets through Tourism New Zealand. But primarily it is about practical business advice and a lot of benchmarking against what your peers are doing.
Judy, this one's for you. I picked the stat up from Tourism New Zealand. So it said that 80% of the long-haul travel in India is booked by agent. So how can TEC help businesses, local tourism businesses, better connect with some of those agents?
So I guess through agents, that's when we basically mean that the traditional distribution channel, where obviously in India you go to a retail agent and they work with the wholesalers, and here in New Zealand you work with inbound tour operators, as I mentioned, and then they are the ones that makes all the bookings of the suppliers of the accommodations and then package everything up. So as mentioned, the inbound tour operators have been in India for many, many years, even before tourism was in market. So they have a lot of experience. And as the market matures and evolves as well, I mean, these guys are in market multiple times a year, so they certainly do understand those change in consumer behavior as well as the supplier changing demands and needs as well. So it's then they have a really good knowledge of matching those as people are coming through and hopefully ultimately providing that high quality level of customer service and experience as people are coming to New Zealand.
And Som, I was talking to you before, and you said you've been in New Zealand for about a week, and you go home tomorrow. Have you seen any opportunities related to tourism and travel and technology that New Zealand tourism businesses could leverage off in your experience here?
You're linking up technology and tourism?
Yeah.
No, I think it's been quite wonderful last 6 days as I went around. I think New Zealand has done an increasingly amazing job in terms of getting the message across, right? And today technology is the one that gets the message across because we have a very large young group and they are getting more and more mobile. Their average income is going up and they are actually becoming tourists. I remember that I traveled to New Zealand much later in my life as a tourist because I had to finish all the other lists that you had put up of the destinations that come to board, and then you come. But I think today's youth is actually far more mobile. They're searching out for new destinations. They don't necessarily want to tick off saying they saw the Big Ben or whatever else, right? But I think they, in a sense, also do struggle because I also, when I went to various websites seeking what I should do in New Zealand, I do find that many of these commercial websites tend to become advertisement driven. So I don't really trust when they rank the top 10 places to go. And you're actually kind of struggling, what it is. And if you know that between our two countries, everybody knows Auckland, Christchurch, all because of cricket, right? And these are the grounds that they know. But how do you navigate here? Where do you go there? So I think there is a need to come up with suggested itineraries, stuff that I know that you have to be democratic. You have to offer all the options that exist, right? But how do you start prioritizing? There are people who would be for adventure, but there are mostly people who would come in for the nature here. And if we can advise them on the, I think we have a lot of similarities. I think if you look at India, the warmth that exists for New Zealanders, half the job is done, right? We feel welcomed, and I think it's vice versa as well. So I think there are connections. You don't feel threatened. I think people believe, and it is true, that among many other things happen in the West, New Zealand is a safer destination. And I think you spoke about sustainable as well. I think they all realize that we need to play a role doing that. So I think a more promotion of tourism, because as people like us who go back and people say, how was New Zealand? And we tell them about the beauty here, and people, they hear it firsthand. I think they get motivated to look at it again. So I'm not giving you a very technology answer, but a personal experience of how we could further progress this. And one thing leads to the other. Some of the examples that I gave you earlier of tech companies from New Zealand who have done well, I think their partnership started not because they identified each other, but they became friends either through tourism or social interaction, and that led to business. So I think we could translate what starts with tourism to actually becoming business as well.
If I could just respond to that in terms of the itineraries, I should have gone to seek for a travel agent before you travel. That would have given you a really good itinerary based on the ITO suggestions. But there are actually a lot of itinerary suggestions out there. I mean, even on Tourism New Zealand, newzealand.com has a whole bunch of suggestions as well. But yeah, like, how do we make sure that every visitors like yourself are able to find it? And if I could just give a couple of examples of technology, I mean, we have a couple of our tourism operators in the audience where, a rental car company recently launched a simulation experience. So when visitors land, they can actually try and drive and make sure, our Indian visitors sort of don't freak out when they drive on the road and they're the only car on the road. So, we certainly have a lot of very innovative operators in our country already that's adopting technology to enhance their experience. And another one, a helicopter company that's developing like a GoPro thing to identify where they've been and where they've gone. So I think it's definitely there, but we certainly want to drive more of that and provide capability assistance for those that are not quite there yet as well. So yeah, so there's definitely heaps of opportunities.
I think they might need to roll out the technology in India too, because when I rented a car there, I was driving down the road and 3 lanes became 6 lanes pretty quickly. And then it went down to 4, 5, 6, and it was only a 2-lane wide road. So
there you go. Promote your product into the Indian market, guys.
Tourism New Zealand's research suggests that New Zealand is well known for affordable activities. And we listened to Simon today talking about that value for money is the perception around it's been challenged at the moment. How do New Zealand operators continue to offer good value proposition?
Well, one of the characteristics of the Indian market, which hasn't been talked about so far, is its wish to barter and bargain for every dollar. And that is still a strong characteristic of the Indian market. And talking to an operator today, it's sort of disappearing from some of the other markets that used to be like that as well. So, many operators in New Zealand will have the Indian visitor come in and ask, what is the best price? And can you do a better price than that? What level of discount? And there is that desire for discount. And sometimes it will be acknowledging that will be the expectation from an Indian visitor. And if you build that into your pricing model, you've got the ability to provide some discount. The customer receives a bit of a discount off the list price. They're happy, they believe they're getting good value. The head of the family's done their job to save the family some money. And then and if you follow that up by delivering an outstanding quality experience, then everyone will be happy. But it is certainly something we still hear from operators, that it's understanding that the Indian visitor, and this of course is a generalisation, is very happy if they're able to negotiate a discount.
I guess also rather than discount, so it's value add. So, so it doesn't hurt a business's bottom line as much, but, like little value adds of whether it's a little key ring or a little souvenir from their shop, that increase in a few dollars is again perceived to be, they've got something out for nothing, which is, certainly, again, the family head is that, yep, I've done something more than, if I don't ask, I don't get. So it's also about that as well. So not always necessarily discounting, but value adding.
Aaron, did you want to add to that?
Yep, a couple of things. I think currently looking at the Indian outbound market, because New Zealand's kind of ultra long haul, and you need a visa to come in. So you need to kind of, when you're applying for a New Zealand visa, you need to send your bank statements and show your income tax returns. So that kind of divides the men from the boys, so to speak. So what we get is really high value visitors to start with. We don't have a serious issue from that perspective. We end up with visitors who've been through to Europe before, who are staying here kind of long. Maybe I think the average length of stay is about 14 days, which is pretty healthy. Then from the value perspective, Queenstown's seen as an adventure capital of the world. One of our operators, is Skydive. Enzone Skydive is one of the biggest operators we have down there. And it's like it's not natural to think that India would be a really big market for them, but it is. India is the third largest market for Skydive for Enzone, which is a surprise for a lot of people. It is probably one of the most expensive products that you can buy while you're in Queenstown. And they do that because they come up to the counter and then they want to, they're jumping in April and May. They know that's not that busy. Indians like to get value, so they have a discussion to see what value they can get. And it can be as simple as saying, okay, we'll give you the photos as part of the experience. And then that's it. And then they're sold to the idea. They just want to make sure that they are not overpaying for anything. That's the only rationale.
It's very natural to want to get the best deal, isn't it? Yep. Another question. Interestingly, you talk about how much value they are. I just took some data from Australia because our growth rate over the last year has exceeded Australia's growth rate from the Indian market, and they have direct flights. And so, to me, even though we don't have direct flights, it hasn't inhibited our growth. And so, perhaps we don't need it, a direct service. But what do you think?
I've got a strong opinion about it. We do need direct services. There's no other answer. Nothing less than that is acceptable. And it's growth percentages have got to do with the base numbers, right? So Australia, maybe like 15 years back, was about 50,000. They reached 100,000 years back. I'm not too sure what the current numbers are, but I would assume it's maybe about 300,000 visitors.
320.
320, there you go. So when you're at 320 and your growth rate drops from about 20% to 10%, well, no surprises. So we are growing quite well, which is good. The Indian market is growing quite well, which is good. I think it's about 20% up for the last year. But the floodgates will open when the direct services come on. Like that's the difference. So we will get to about, like, if the flights start now at about 68,000, then you'll get to 100,000 at half the time it will take without the direct services. It also opens up an even more lucrative and higher end of the market, which is incentives. So when Indian companies, a lot of companies in India that are Indian, as well as Fortune 500 companies that operate out of India, have got really strong incentive schemes in place for their staff and dealers. So if you qualify with your sales, right, you'll have a silver level, a gold level, and New Zealand is the platinum level at the moment. So for the top end, they look at New Zealand as a high-end destination, and then they send them here. A lot of queries that we get are not fulfilled, or we can't convert them, not because of a demand issue, but because of a supply issue. They want to get in and out of the destination fast. They don't want to spend 1.5 days trying to get here and another day going back. So direct services are required. We are fortunate that we have growth without it, but we need it to really get the full potential out of the Indian market. I will not let anyone say anything else. Next question, Jamie.
I want to push you a little bit more there, Kieran. Just a little bit more, and just say that out of those 60,000 visitors that did come, only 2,000 came on business. Will that make any difference to what you're saying?
It's got to do with how they tick on arrival. So a lot of these incentive groups don't tick as business; they tick as leisure. That's why, if you look at the number of incentive groups that we get, I mean, we can get that data through the inbound operators. It is a lot more than 2,000 in a year. In fact, we've got way back 8 years back, we had one group that was 950. We are currently in discussion with a group that's coming in April next year, which is 1,000 passengers, and it's just one group. There are 1,000 passengers, and coming back to my point about diet, the 1,000 passengers are coming in 3 lots of 300 or 350 each, but they have 29 chefs coming with them. So there you go. Like that kind of talks about what quality of groups we are getting down here, because they are coming with their own chefs to make sure that the dietary requirements are met, and that the delegates here have got a really good wide variety of food to choose from while they are here.
Yeah. So I was in Paris, and we were at the embassy, and we were being served in the embassy in hot Indian food. And I was wondering, where were they cooking this food in the embassy? And they said, no, it's being catered. So you should meet the caterer. I called the caterer, and he came in and met me. And I said, where are you cooking all this? he says, I've got a caravan sitting outside. And so he had this caravan where he was cooking all this food. So I said, okay, you have enough business here? He said he has 27 such caravans. And he says, all these tourists from India, particularly from Gujarat, come, and they are strictly vegetarian. And he says, in front of us is the bus carrying these Gujaratis, and behind that is my caravan. From morning to evening, I do nothing else but feed them, right? So I think they found an innovative way, right? So they don't actually bring the chefs with them, they're already there.
You can invest in some caravans down in Queenstown, perhaps. Chris, there's some substantial issues around people and skills within the tourism industry, which have constraining growth. Do we have the right people and set of skills to deliver experience that the Indian market want?
Potentially, and actually we have a lot of people working in our hotel sector in particular who are Indian. So we have New Zealand Indians, we have Indian students, and we have temporary work visa holders from India as well. So you'll see, if you spend any time in hotels in New Zealand in particular, a lot of Indian ethnicity staff, and they have and they're very good at their jobs. And I think we welcome them. We've seen some recent changes to student work rights, which may be a challenge to some of our industry in finding the staff they need, because they use a lot of those people. But I think we have a big enough New Zealand Indian population, as we do with other cultures like China. We have the people, the local people here, who understand the cultures, be it food or other cultural elements of the visitors. So there is really no excuse for us not to deliver for the Indian market or any other market, because New Zealand's a very multicultural place, and so we do have the right people. Getting them to work in tourism and hospitality is a challenge that the industry is discussing a lot. Comes back to a relatively low population in the country, a lot of competing industries. There's quite a big construction boom in New Zealand, so that's an industry desperately looking for young people to work in. Dairy industry needs workers. We've got an ageing population, so the rest home industry needs workers. I mean, I go to these cross-sector groups, and every industry stands up and says, we're desperate to find workers, we're desperate to find workers. So we're all competing for young people. Great for young people in New Zealand at the moment. There's industry after industry wanting them to come join them, and we have to do our best to attract them to our industry.
Is there any suggestions or advice for operators to attract people to the industry and into their company?
Well, there's no magic bullet. We've just done a whole lot of research into what the perceptions of young New Zealanders are about working in tourism, and it's debunked some myths and confirmed some other myths, but there is no single answer to that. It's going to take time. We need to change some of the attitudes. We have to explain to people that whatever you want to do in your career, whatever is your passion, be it marketing, be it flying, be it retail, be whatever type of industry career you fancy, you can do it in tourism somewhere. And tourism is a more fun place to do it. If you want to be a marketer, come do tourism marketing. That's a fun job. If you want to be a communicator, come do communications in tourism. So we're trying to explain that tourism is a very broad category, and whatever it is that you want to do as a young person with your life, you can find a way to do it in tourism and have a lot of fun along the way.
And I guess to add to that, previously mentioned, one of our subsidiary called Young Tourism Export Council is set up a few years back for young professionals to join and be networking together, and also come together as a career development opportunities, as well as their own conference and things. And as part of those initiatives, they are sort of we've kind of volunteered them in a way that, you know, these are examples and stories of where you can work in tourism as a young person. So, you know, so they kind of become poster childs of in examples that, you know, as a young person, you can go into a tourism inbound tour operator and do all these things, and or you can be in a hotel and grow from, you know, receptionist all the way up to a director of sales. Or so I think, you know, with our organisations, providing those live examples to support some of these research that have been undertaken, and I think jointly, as Chris have said, we are all working collaboratively together, and in all the different regions as well, to trying to tackle that.
It was a 30-minute sales pitch. Right. So, you know, we were talking about direct flights, and direct flights should come in, but you've got to fill up the airplanes there, and we had the aviation people saying it has to be a big aircraft. We need 300 people on that flight to make it viable. So it can't be filled up with outbound travelers from India. We need inbound. So please promote Indian tourism as well. Right. You'll probably see a lot more traffic coming in.
Well, I think that will be that will certainly be a consequence of any direct flights, that you will see the same sort of explosion in New Zealanders, because there's the same latent wish from New Zealanders to visit India, and given the convenience of a direct flight, you would certainly see more, I'm sure.
And Gary's just asked me one last question: is what ways could the INZBC and its members help support the New Zealand tourism economy or the Indian tourism economy? This is for all.
I'll kick off. I guess probably as part of my talk is invest, you know, your next business adventure in tourism. You know, I've met various people in the audience today, you know, or in the last day or two, whether you're a software company or architecture firm or whatever it is, that you're currently not investing or working in tourism, but, you know, definitely there's a lot of potential there in your area. But then, you know, the product that you develop, the next app you develop can have a really good application to a tourism business. So do consider those opportunities and be open to some of those opportunities when you get approached from New Zealand side as well. I think jointly and collaboratively, there's certainly a lot of opportunities there.
Very similar. We've seen a lot of, because of the growth in the Chinese market, we've seen a lot of New Zealand Chinese invest in tourism. Develop everything from investing in hotels to developing, you know, little small niche tourism guiding businesses and other things. The same should be happening with the Indian market. We're seeing 15 to 20% growth year on year, and every forecast telling us that's going to continue. So any industry with that potential and with that growth level, there are going to be so many business opportunities right across the whole spectrum.
A number of people have spoken about the number of Indians living in New Zealand and the growth in the areas, and that will drive numbers. And you often see the families out with friends and families, brothers, sisters from home. So look, it's the better service and acceptance that Indian travellers get. The snowball will just keep turning, and it's not only the Indians coming from India; it's also Indians living in Australia coming over, and particularly with social media and technology, it will just grow.
Coming back to your point, Jamie, for year ending August 2018, we've had 68,000 Indian visitors. 2,000 of them were business visitors. So if the question is, what can India and New Zealand Business Council do? Then my answer would be do more business. So we get the 2,000 up as well, and then that'll just help us with the overall mix to get those direct flights in place.
Okay. And let's thank all of our panel members. He mihi nui kia koutou. I hope you have a good time in New Zealand, Tom, in your last day, and hope everyone travels safely. Thank you.